you can't just be in one channel. And that goes in the reverse, by the way. You can't just have a brick and mortar store and not grow a website.
Welcome, listeners and viewers. I have Rebekah Kondrat today from Recon Retail. Rebekah, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much. I am very excited to be here.
So, Rebekah, retail is alive, right?
Retail is alive. Retail is alive. I believe it so much that I had that phrase trademarked. So, if you want to use it, actually, you said it. You said it on your podcast. I don't know. Do you owe me money? I'm not sure on this one, but I truly believe that retail is alive.
Yeah, you actually trademarked this.
That's right.
It's really, really interesting. Obviously, retail is huge, right? It's still 75% or 80% of U.S. overall business, right? Obviously, e-commerce is increasing in a higher percentage rates, but I mean, the retail is still where businesses are happening, although there's a lot of hype around e-commerce and social commerce, but obviously the numbers are speaking for themselves. But Rebekah, before we dive into the episode, I'd like to share like 3 words that are probably representing you the best, or probably they're important to you in your personal life or your professional life. And why you chose this word.
Okay, this is admittedly tough, but just here's what's coming to mind for me. I think the first one is evolve or evolving, if you want to put an action around it, because I think that both personally, professionally, and like when you look at the industry, the retail industry, evolution is incredibly important. And so to be able to evolve with it is really important to me. So I see myself as an evolution. I'm not like a set person.
Right.
Okay, number 2, the second one is, this one's hard to make it just one word. I wanted to say like action oriented, but let's say active. I think that what I very much enjoy, and one of the reasons why I founded Recon Retail, was to, very actively help brands as an embedded partner, and not just make like 50-page slideshow decks about what they should do with their strategy, but no, like actually go. Like 2 days ago, I was in Philly at a store all day. It's about to open. It opens tomorrow. I will actually be back tomorrow morning just to check on it, just to make sure that things are, as they should be. The build out is completed. The training is done. Everything is set up. The operations are set up. So really wanted to be a partner to brands and not just like a, McKinsey style, here's your deck, like plop it in your lap and then pay me whatever they get paid, $500,000. I don't know. Not knocking McKinsey. No, people at McKinsey love them, but it's not what I wanted to do. So active, so evolving, active, and then I would say resilient. This one's a little bit more personal because I think over the course of, I've been working with brands both in-house and in this capacity for over 20 years now. And, sometimes like a brand will go by the wayside. I used to work with some of these brands that either don't exist or were acquired and are kind of shadows of their former selves, and some of them that have skyrocketed ahead, like a Warby Parker, And so I think having some resilience is really, really important. I also think as a business owner, having resilience is important. It's not for the faint of heart, right? As you have to constantly be out there and hustling and all of that, as our brands do. So, we have that in common.
Yeah, it's great to see. And see you're smiling when you are just describing, everything you do and everything that you feel. So really appreciate it and thank you. It helps a lot, right, to understand, who you are, what's important for you, and also for our guests to figure out and to understand with whom we are talking to. So thank you very, very much for sharing that. And going back to retail is alive, right? Again, it's your trademark, not mine, just repeating you. But on the other hand, people say retail is dying, it's stagnated, it's end of retail. What these people are missing?
Yeah. It's funny. I'm having a little bit of deja vu because I just had this conversation yesterday, but with someone on the finance side. They were not in retail, and they were basically like, aren't you concerned that, all brands are just going to go to web sales and that your business is going to dry up and this and that? And I said, actually, I am, after COVID especially, I'm even more convinced that retail will continue on into the future. So kind of what I say to that, and we were talking a little bit of statistics before we started here, but 70-80% of all purchases, especially things like apparel, accessories, footwear, are still made in person, like in real life, right? And so, I think that that's the first thing. But the second thing is, I think what brands are finding, and, the reason why I am so bullish on retail is that you can't just be a single channel brand. Like those days are done. right? Like there are founders who kind of famously said they launched online and said, I will never open stores. Guess what? They have like 200 stores now. So, I think what they're learning is, sure, there's a certain customer that will shop online and maybe loyal and continue to shop online forever and ever, even if you don't have a physical presence. But then you're leaving a huge percentage of the addressable market out of the equation by not allowing them to experience the brand in the physical world. And that could mean owned stores, which is what I do. It could mean wholesale. It could mean some sort of like partnerships like pop-ins at Nordstrom or, shop-in-shops or things like that. But you can't just be in one channel. And that goes in the reverse, by the way. You can't just have a brick and mortar store and not have a website. That's like not a real thing.
Yeah, omnichannel is the must, right? Omnichannel.
Exactly. Yes.
I mean, for the success of the brand, and I mean, like any investor or someone who's planning, to invest or look at any company, I mean, omnichannel is so critical. Definitely a combination of offline and online. But why do you think there is kind of a general, maybe not general, but some people think that retail is too complex? Maybe the barrier to entry is higher for a D2C brand. By the way, I think today I'm really not sure, right? Because it's very, very difficult across any online channel, right? I mean, Amazon, Meta, definitely. Things are more complex and need a lot of money, right, to break through, to be very, very smart in the way you build listing and just work on these platforms. What do you think about, and what do you recommend for a D2C founder when in what stage of their life cycle they need to be seriously thinking about retail?
Yeah, it's a good question because while I firmly believe that brands need to be multi-channel, omni-channel, whatever term you want to use for that, there is kind of a like right time, and not to talk out of both sides of my mouth, but there is a right time, but also it's a little bit like, I've heard people say this about having kids, right? It's like, you're never ready, so just go ahead and like do it at some, like decide and do it, But what I will say is there is kind of, maybe it's not so much there's a right time, but there's a wrong time, right? And so if you're a brand new brand, you've just launched your website, you're still finding product market fit, you're still, figuring out who your customer avatar is, you're still learning about where they live, where they play, what your like demographic, psychographic makeup is of your target customer. Don't open a store until you at least have a firm belief in what those things are and confirmatory data, right? So, for me, and this is not a hard and fast rule, but typically that means $10,000 in gross revenue, $10 million in gross revenue. So, you have to like have at least $10 million in gross revenue under your belt, like, and be making that consistently on an annual basis just to, have enough data. In my experience, again, are there brands who are making $3 million that have enough data? Yes. Are there brands who are making 50 that maybe don't have enough data? Maybe. I don't know. I haven't met them. But, I think that having enough information about your customers, their behavior, their feedback, ensuring that your product is the right one, it's what they want. Those are critical things. And then what you can do with that is go where your customers are. Right. And so you mentioned leasing, you mentioned, I think this idea that it's like a little bit scary. It's expensive. Although, as you know, I'm using kind of like air quotes because if a brand looks at how much they've spent on Meta, for example, or even on like influencer marketing, you go get a big influencer on TikTok or whatever to drive traffic to your brand. I bet you it's probably the cost of what your first year lease would be, right? So, your first year's rent would be in your lease. It's just more that capital outlay comes all at once. And it is really scary to like suddenly be, turning over hundreds of thousands of dollars in a short time frame when you're building out your store and you're paying your first month's rent and your first year's year of operations. So, but if you have that demographic information and you've really plotted out smartly where your customers are, then of course you're more likely to succeed. You can market directly to them. You have an early adopter base there. So, those are kind of the things, the way that I would answer that without like fully answering. Sorry.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's worth probably explaining at this stage, right, that we talked about, retail, but it has a lot of different forms of operation, right? We have like retail and wholesale and B2B and online channels and offline channels. You took a very specific route and actually build up of those physical stores, those brick and mortar locations, what also known as like retail as a service maybe. So please explain exactly, what you do at Recon and why you chose, that specific path of operation.
Yeah. No, it's a good question. So yeah, I'll hold my comment to the end on retail as a service because I don't like that term for us. There are retail as a service companies, but I'll explain that in a second. So just to explain my background a little bit, I spent my first 10 years opening Starbucks and Apple stores and running them and operating them and doing training and doing operations and all of that. And so having this kind of deep knowledge of two like really, truly best in class brands, both from a customer experience standpoint and a product standpoint, kind of gave me that foundation. Then there was this new brand called Warby Parker that no one had heard of that, had opened, like they took a bus and they drove it around the country and they collected data. This is the important data piece again. Okay. They collected data about their customers, what were their top selling markets, et cetera, et cetera. And then they started opening stores and they needed people to open stores. So where do you go to find those people? Well, they went to Apple. And so when I joined, there was about 3.5, and I say and a half because one of them was the bus stores. And, when I left, there was 35. Now I think there's several hundred or at least 200, something like that. But, I kind of saw this evolution, to use one of my words, right, of where retail was going, was that you had these like really powerful legacy players like an Apple or a Nike or a, kind of like insert your best in class brand here. But then you had these like Warby Parkers and like Everlane had just opened a store. And like, but a little bit before this, Bonobos, right, had opened our showroom model where they didn't sell clothing out of it. They only had it so you could try it on, which they then changed because they learned from the customer that that's not what they wanted. And these brands didn't have any in-house retail muscle. They were all e-commerce people, right? Which is great. That's how they got their brand to where it was, so that it was ready to open a store. So, it was very clear and evident that there was in-house expertise needed. So after going to Warby, helping them build that up, going to Ultra Voices, helping them build that up in the days when they were opening stores and they were kind of hot new brand, right? And then going to Joybird Furniture was my last one before the Lazy Boy acquisition, and helping them build their first store and that channel out. I was kind of like, wait a second, there's like a pattern here, and there's way more brands that want to open stores and they all need help. And so what Recon does is we come alongside them as, I like the term embedded partner. We're an external partner, so we obviously don't work directly for the brand. We are an agency, but really embedded. The brand feels like we're a part of their team. We're their outsourced retail expansion and retail development team. And so we will do everything. We'll take them soup to nuts through everything. We'll help them find an architect, find a designer if they need that. Sometimes they already have one of those where they have in-house design, which is great. And then once we have all the drawings, bid GCs, bid fabricators, oversee construction. But what our sweet spot really is operations. So we are all of the members of the Recon team are operators. We've all run stores. We've been in stores on the front lines. And this component is so critical because you can have the most beautiful store with a waterfall feature in the middle of it. And then if your customer experience is crap, people will not come back, right? Or if it's clunky and, I can't ring you up because XYZ system, or it takes me 20 minutes to get the inventory because the stock room is downstairs and disorganized or whatever it is, right? And so that operations component, no one will talk about it if it's done well, but if it's done badly, it comes up in customer reviews, in feedback, in PR, et cetera.
Sure.
So that's really like we take the brand from the beginning all the way to store opening, hiring, staffing, training. But the difference between us and the retail as a service model, I'm going to come back around to that now, is, there are retail as a service companies that will, the brand will ship them the product. The retail as a service company owns the lease. They own the employees. They essentially own the product and kind of pay a commission back to the brand. And yes, brand has a storefront with the name above the door, and a customer can walk in and, try on the product or look at the product or whatever it is. But they don't actually own that store. And they're not building the internal muscle to have a retail channel. And so our philosophy is, if you want to be successful, if you want your retail channel to be successful, it has to be in-house. So we want to build it with you, not for you.
Yeah.
Right. And so we'll obviously be more heavily involved in the beginning. But then as the brand opens more stores, maybe they hire a director of retail, which, by the way, we will help them hire. Maybe they hire some like operations coordinators so that, the stores can get what they need to manage facilities or whatnot. It grows a little bit arms and legs if you don't think about the infrastructure. And then we actually build in our own obsolescence. I'm not sure if this is a good business model or not. I mean, so far it's been working, but we will be very upfront and say, we don't want to work with you like forever and ever, or at least not in this heightened capacity. If you want us to then move into a smaller role, if we just manage new build outs for you, which we do for a couple of brands, fine. But like, we shouldn't be your VP of retail forever. That's not, you're never going to learn how to run this channel, and you're never going to benefit from it fully because you don't talk directly to your customers. You don't get their feedback. You actually can't affect change at the level that you need to. So yeah, that was my very long-winded way to come around.
Yeah, very important, and thank you for clarifying that. So the brands will sign the lease agreement. They will hire their employees. And you build this entire, the planning and the build out and the constructions and everything just together with the brand as a part of your service engagement. Right. Nice. What about the staff that need to be recruited, trained? Who is doing that?
So we will write the training. Sometimes brands have, especially if they have a CX team, right? They'll have some sort of training and, some sort of like FAQ or something like that. We take that as a starting point, but that obviously having a customer in front of you instead of on the phone or on chat or on email is very different. So we will take that and make it a front of line retail training. We will build NSO trainings, and we actually have a facilitation background from Apple. So, know a little bit about instructional design and facilitation. And so we will do that. We will help the brand. I think it's important, an important distinction that you made. The employees are not Recon employees, right? They're whatever brand employees. But if they don't have that retail frontline recruiting muscle, then we will help them, we'll post their jobs, we'll screen their applications. We'll even be the first line of interviews if needed, kind of playing that VP of retail role. And then obviously the brand gets to decide if they're a culture fit or not, on that side, and has the final say in who they hire. And obviously the brand onboards them indirectly, but we can help them. If you don't have a payroll system, we'll help you do that. If you don't have a hourly workforce scheduling system, we can get you onboarded with that, so we truly value we make SOAR.
Yeah, any aspect of the desert. Amazing. So you've done it many times, and you mentioned you worked for like research companies, and you still enjoy it, which is amazing and it is great. So what separates a store that is truly, drive profit versus, others that are just probably marketing expense?
Yeah, which actually...
You mentioned customer support, but I guess there are many other factors as well, right?
There are many other factors, but just a quick belief note, and this goes back to that, like, retail is alive. I know that some brands will view a store as a marketing expense, but and that's fine, whatever, however you want to do that. But what we truly believe at Recon is that every store should be four-wall profitable. So like, great, cool, you want to view it as a marketing expense. You should absolutely measure the halo effect, which is like when you open a store in a certain geo, how much does it lift your e-commerce sales in those surrounding zip codes, et cetera. Definitely measure those things. However, the store itself alone should be four-wall profitable.
Yeah.
And so to get there, I think, is what you're asking, like, what's the difference, right? I think customer experience is huge. And that goes back to making sure that the people that you're hiring are aligned with the brand mission, understand the product, and are really able to act as that expert and build rapport with the customer. I think rapport building is a little bit of a dying art in retail. I mean, I've had a lot of bad retail experiences, which just hurts me, like, really, truly at my core. But, I think it comes from the, let's call it HQ, headquarters of a brand, not giving the retail teams what they need in terms of like enough training support, enough attention. I mean, headquarters should be in the stores. And this is actually one of the other things that we will tell brands, like, yes, go where your customers are, but your very, very first store should be in your backyard so that you can go and visit it. So like, I don't care if your largest customer base is in New York and you're based in North Carolina, you need to put your first store in North Carolina. I'm sorry. Like that, it has to be there. And I'm not saying build a $10 million store in North Carolina, but like, put that store there as a prototype so that you can be in there listening to customers and what they're and hearing what they're saying to the store associates, the feedback, all of that. I think the other thing is that's very different from e-commerce, and I dealt with this with a brand that had stores kind of across the US in varied climates, and we were talking earlier about how it's like 30 degrees here, and I'm sure it's much warmer where you are.
Yeah.
The product mix actually has to match. Like, you can't send the same product to every store. On a website, you have all of your products, of course. Like, yes, because it's coming from a centralized warehouse, you can do that. You can't treat your stores like a website. You can't just send all of the product to one store. If you're in Florida, please do not send the parkas like that unless you're in resort town. I mean, there are exceptions here. If you're in a resort town and people who are in that town go and ski in Aspen in the winter, fine, send the parkas. But like, really be smart and know what your customers are going to buy, because then that becomes the merchandising mix on the floor becomes that like self-fulfilling prophecy to drive AOV, average order value, drive UPT, units per transaction, which are really the things that are going to up that profitability of the store.
Yeah.
So, I think it's customer experience, it's product fit, and then like the store, the customer journey needs to make sense. It needs to optimize for try. And we talk a lot about apparel because that's frankly a lot of retail is apparel, but it could be, I'm wearing Warby Parker glasses, shocker. Could be glasses, it could be jewelry, but like, how are you getting the customer's hands on the product? Because as soon as they touch a product, as soon as they try it on, as soon as they start envisioning themselves in it or envisioning it in their homes, in the case of like a furniture or a home goods, they are much, much, much higher now on the likelihood to buy scale, like much higher. So, getting that as quickly as possible is something that also the stores need to, or the headquarters team needs to optimize for.
Yes. And that product selection, probably selecting the right products. Are you also involved in
That's right.
workers? You're selecting the hero products or the relevant products for the local.
Yeah. So we will certainly like advise on that and do planograms and visual merchandising maps and things like that. Yes, we have done, even like peripheral products, like maybe the brand is an apparel brand, but because they want to appear holistic and one of their values is wellness, they also want to sell some like skincare wellness products. Okay, great. Like, let's look at that strategy and make sure that it kind of aligns with, what your brand mission and vision is. So yes, we will do that as well.
Nice. And in terms of the store staff, I think, the job description is kind of evolving, right? It's not just sales people, right? It's maybe like brand ambassadors, maybe community builders. Well, what do you think about all these, different functions or different, tasks that are required today from a store staff?
No, it's true. I think it is interesting, and I should probably do like an exercise around this. I bet AI could do it pretty quickly. But I think the sales associate as a title is kind of going away. And you'll see a lot of like brand ambassador. I think Lululemon calls their employees educators. Apple calls their employees specialists. Warby Parker calls their employees advisors. So I think it's definitely not like a transactional, I'm just going to be at a cash register and boop, boop, boop. Okay, that's $5 or whatever, But yes, I think especially with this going back to omnichannel, with this kind of new omnichannel world, it's like we may ask associates to like take a quick video that the team can post on, the social media team can post on social, right? Like we may ask them to clientele like luxury brands do, right? Like clienteling across different brands, even if their products are not like technically luxury, like traditional luxury, Chanel or Louis Vuitton or something like that, they're still clienteling to customers because they want that personal connection with their customer base, So now we're videographers or we're social media, photo and video takers. We're, they don't often do the posting, but at least they'll like help with content creation. We're now like kind of doing some like bized out clienteling. And the other thing that I'm seeing become more and more prevalent is this idea of B2B and how can we, kind of activate a B2B situation. Like, for example, when I was at Outdoor Voices, we would go to like the headquarters of, I don't know, Google, do a yoga class and then have a rack of the clothing, right? Because it's, we know we're capturing that qualified customer because they like yoga, they like being active, and we sell activewear. So like, how do we do more of that? Like kind of a trunk show, but like a very targeted trunk show, So yes, it's definitely evolving.
Yes, yes, and I've seen like various interesting use cases. Like I've met with Estee Lauder, and they're incentivizing their staff to create content, and they also have like commission structures so they can earn actual commission from actual sales. So just incentivize the staff to create online content to sell not just in the physical store but elsewhere, right online. I think it's very, very exciting evolution of this. Rebekah, anything exciting excites you about new innovations or new customer experience around retail that you want to share?
Yeah, so I have noticed, and I'm really actually happy about this. So let's actually go back to the story of like, I feel like there was this inflection point with COVID. I mean, for everyone in all facets of life, there was kind of an inflection point for COVID, but specific to retail, there was this inflection point where COVID happens, we're all on our sofas, we're ordering like home goods and home improvement stuff like crazy because suddenly we're looking at our apartments and going like, ew, I hate this place, and we're repainting our walls. Fine. Okay, so that industry had a really great boom, but anybody in like workwear apparel was like really suffering. So fine, we had this like inflection point. People start saying exactly what you said to me at the beginning, which is like, oh, everybody's going to get so used to ordering online that we're not going to want retail anymore. I didn't believe that for a second. I actually created Recon Retail in 2020. So like, that's how much I believed in it. So, those things were being said. And then once the vaccines hit and people were going outside and there was this kind of like idea of revenge spending, brands were still quite hesitant and they were opening stores, but they were doing it. There wasn't like a belief behind it. Many of these leases were 1 year, 2 year, 3 year leases. Right. So come 2023, we suddenly have a lot of leases coming up, a lot of vacancies again. Okay. So now what I've started seeing, especially on the major high streets, and this is both in the US and abroad, is a return of brands wanting flagship retail, which like that just makes me so happy. So if, for example, we have a client that just opened on Madison Avenue. It is their first store and they went all in on Madison. Like caddy corner to Bottega Veneta, and this is literally their first store. And they were like, no, we don't need to test with like a 1 year lease and a tiny, 1,000 square foot little door. We're going to actually just open a flagship. And honestly, if you're going to put that much capital and time behind a store, like it's kind of incremental, just open the flag.
Yeah.
So we're starting to see more and more flagship retail opening. Skims did something similar, where they were just like, nope, we're going to just go big or go home and open up on Fifth Avenue kind of thing. So I'm very excited by that. I think, with respect to like, look, I can't have a conversation really ever without talking about AI. What I'm excited about with respect to AI is not like some of the more visible stuff. And okay, fine, test like fitting room screens that uses AI to tell you what other products you should buy. Okay, fine. Do that, I guess. Like that's fine. I'm all about that. But it's more like the hidden stuff. The stuff that like used to be done for hours and hours on spreadsheets, like figuring out replenishment or figuring out, what additional products I should request based on what my store is selling now. Like using technology to make the unsexy things work better and faster. And that way the store teams can be more focused on the like high value interactions, like building your brand and building affinity with customers and building rapport and clienteling, right? Like all of these things take time. Taking your video for, that like TikTok of you putting on the lipstick or whatever it is,
Yeah.
So I'm actually very excited about the unseen advantages that are coming up in retail.
Nice. Rebekah, can you describe your ideal customer profile?
Ooh, okay. I think there's actually kind of two. So if that's okay.
Sure.
I think the first one is, a brand who has tested a few small things. Maybe they're not actual stores. They're like activations. They've done a shop in shop or maybe a pop-up or something like that. And they know, okay, retail is for us and we're ready to enter it in, like a substantial way. And that substantial does not necessarily mean you're spending $1 million on your store. Just to be clear, like we work with brands of all, that are like, I want to build a store for $50,000. I want to build a store for $3 million, kind of thing. So there's not like we won't work with you if you don't want to spend $1 million. Fine. So I think ready to commit in a substantial way and know they need to like spend the time and effort and money, to do it right the first time and set up the like kit of parts and make it scalable. That's great. The other type of brand that we will work with is more on the like feasibility side. So they have a lot of, going back to what I was saying at the beginning, they have a lot of data. They have a lot of customer data. They know they have product market fit. They probably haven't tried any physical activations, but maybe a few, like maybe some little ones, but like nothing really, really substantial. But they want to know, is now the right time? Is it the right time to open retail? I only make, $7 million annually, but like I feel like we really have enough information and we have some capital reserve for this. So like let's talk about that, and where could you go? Where should you go? How do you make the most out of your retail entry, if you will? So I would say those are really like the two stages where we encounter brands that we are, we're like, yes, this is our wheelhouse. We do a lot of other things. Sometimes a brand comes to us when they've already signed a lease and the project is in distress. We've done some turnarounds, where we come in and we're like, let's whip it into shape, so we certainly do that too. But yeah, I would say we like those two when we get to come in at the beginning and we're not cleaning up any messes.
Sure. I mean, obviously you talked a lot of opportunities and brands, and you need to qualify somehow, right? That's to figure out you focus on the right places. Sure. Great, Rebekah. So how people can find you and Recon?
Okay, well, we have our website, reconretail.com. I will occasionally post on X, although I've been really delinquent lately, but I do sometimes post on X. I'm RD Kondrat on X, or Twitter, or whatever you want to call it, Dave. But yeah, I would say mostly our website, sometimes on LinkedIn, but Recon Retail, REKON, retail.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rebekah. It was super interesting. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. This has been a pleasure.